The only thing I would add is it helps for children to be able to borrow from our strength and our calm. So just if we can generate a calm, firm, caring, loving, open embrace, children can borrow from that strength no matter how much they're struggling.
Thank you to Magic Mind, our first ever sponsor. The stuff is really, really good. Here we are yet again with another episode of Beyond Risk and Back. Thank you for joining me this week. We're going to talk about violence. We're going to talk about anger. We're going to talk about rage and unreasonable, uncontrollable, unfathomable actions by our teenagers towards us, their loving parents, trying to put upon them the consequences that will teach them that their strategy is flawed. And I know, parents, if you are listening to this episode, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And we have Dr. Schneider with us. I'm going to have her tell you about herself in a minute. But this has been a topic of question, comment, concern, clarification, quandary, and criticism throughout my career in working with adolescents and families in crisis. And inevitably, it's part of the story when your kid is dealing with drugs, mental health issues. I generally hear my kid took a swipe at me. So let's confront that. Let's talk about that today on Beyond Risk and Back. And if you do like today's episode or any of our episodes, as always, I'm asking you to please go leave a review on Apple iTunes. That is how we are getting into the hands and hearts of other parents who really need help and the support that this podcast brings. So without further ado, parents, teachers, and clinicians who are all joining us yet again on the show, our guest today is Dr. Gina Simmons Schneider. Dr. Schneider, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here, and I really believe in your mission. So I'm glad to be part of it.
Well, thank you. And thank you for taking time out of your day. I know you got clients coming up, so let's get right to it, Doc. Why are you dealing with everybody's anger? I'm assuming somewhere in the story there's some anger of your own, but I'd love to hear how you ended up where you are, especially with the doctor title, in dealing with people's anger and crap. What's going on? How did you end up here?
You know, it's been a long and interesting journey. I'll give you the nutshell version. I started out as an emancipated minor after my father left, and we were in poverty, and I was working to help support my mom and sister. I was able to support myself, and so I ended up living independently and working multiple jobs. 16, I dropped out of high school. I wasn't necessarily an angry teen. My mother and I had a good relationship. I had a fierce desire for independence and did not get along with my mother's new husband. So a lot of your families can probably relate to having a teenager that didn't get along with the new dad. But, you know, I was able to support myself because I just had a lot of drive towards independence and learning. And then I dropped out of high school also really because of poverty too, the transportation costs to get to high school, the bus fare, and also the fact that I went to an inner city school and had a very racist teacher that the school had hired back after he had been really abusive to the people of color in the school. They hired him back, and he was really abusive to my friends. And so I circulated a petition to get him expelled because he was very toxic. I mean, he was screaming at them, calling them every epithet in a history class, you know, for no reason. He was really mentally disturbed. So that really was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back, because I did love learning and I loved school. But I thought, I'm not learning anything from this person. And I also learned from the administration that they weren't going to do anything about it. That was one of the key things I proposed to my mother. I can pay for correspondence school, go through high school, through mail, you know, at that time they didn't have the internet. So I went to high school through correspondence. So they would send me a book, I'd take tests, I'd read the book, you know, I got through my high school that way. I went to community college, and the whole time I was working multiple jobs. So I started out that way. And of course, I also wanted to be a musician. I played guitar and I played in bands, and I had a lot of friends who were musicians. We'd play a few gigs here, make a little money. I did some sales jobs. I did some restaurant work. I did all different kinds of jobs. Had my own house cleaning business. So I had a real affinity for kids who've had it rough, even though I did have love and I wasn't beaten or abused, other than, being abandoned by my father. That was, very emotionally traumatic. But I had a lot of good things happen to me too. So, I always had an affinity for kids who'd had it rough, and I understood what it was like to have to figure out how to get bus fare, how to figure out how to get to and from school yourself, how to make it on your own. I started working in nightclubs as a singer-songwriter while I was going to community college. And I thought I wanted to be a singer-songwriter for my career. That was like my big dream. And I had a lot of friends in the music business, and we were all doing music together. But one day, basically in despair, I was working in a nightclub and I was being harassed. I had my dream of a really good job, a really good nightclub job. It was paying me really well. All of a sudden, I've got stalkers leaving threatening notes on my car. I've got people Xing my face out of the picture on the marquee. I've got people that I don't know who they are, calling the bar, telling them what they're going to do to me. And I thought, you know what? This isn't fun. I'm not enjoying this. My dream of like entertaining people and being a musician didn't come with being a crime victim, So fortunately I wasn't victimized, but I thought, I have no way of defending myself because I don't even know who it is. I don't even know who's doing it. So I was really kind of in despair thinking, what am I going to do? And I took a walk one day and I saw this building with all these flyers plastered on the building and, concert flyers and all this stuff. And one of them really spoke to me, and it said, volunteers needed for suicide crisis hotline, no experience necessary, will train. And I took a number, and even though I needed a paying job then, I really needed paid work. It didn't make any rational sense to do volunteer work. I started working on this hotline, and it was such a life-changing experience because I really did want to help people, and I loved psychology. A lot of my reading was, psychology related. I just was very fascinated with psychology and what made people do what they do. From that decision, I have everything I have today. My family, my husband, everything came from that sort of decision to do volunteer work and change my career. I still play music. My husband and I played in a band. We play gigs and things like that. It's still very fun. But I love the work and helping people. So from that, I started working with juvenile diversion. I worked with juvenile delinquents, incarcerated youth. I did programs with incarcerated youth. I worked for the probation department with convicted youth. So I had a lot of experience even working with kids for whom incarceration was the safest place they ever lived. They would tell me, this the first time in my life I had 3 square meals a day and I could go to sleep and not feel afraid I was going to get beat up. And so I had some real eye-opening experiences there, and they taught me as much as I taught them, probably, if not more. So then from there, I worked in this nonprofit agency. And what was great about it is we had a program in conjunction with the police department to try to reduce juvenile offenders, because the first-time offenders had a 65% recidivism rate within the first year. So they would reoffend within the first year at a 65% rate, which is huge. And the police department is going, we need help. And so we developed a program in conjunction with them, where we did family counseling. The kids were ordered to do an essay, a 1,000-word essay on why what they were doing was wrong. The police had convicted felons come and talk to the kids about how they wish they'd have led a different life, show them what incarceration is really like and how hard it is to get a job and all of that stuff, and drugs. And, we had a drug program. And within that first year, we were able to turn the recidivism rate from 65% down to 5%, which is hugely successful.
Of all the things within that you did, what's the thing you think had the most impact of everything you did with those juveniles?
What's really important for parents who are dealing with high-risk youth to know is that kids respond to strength. And we had the strength of the police department saying, you don't do this program, you're going to serve a sentence. We had the strength of the community saying, you're going down the wrong road, we're showing you a different way. And your parents have to be involved too. And so the parents became in alignment. The parents were aligned with the counselors who were aligned with the police department. And the kids finally felt like kids. Oh, we are not the authority in the room. There are people here with more power than I have, and they're telling me the same thing. And so I think family counseling, I recommend family counseling where the whole family works together, because there are a lot of dynamics in families that fuel dysfunction. And if families can work with a therapist and or therapy community, some kids have to be in a residential treatment facility. I also worked in residential treatment, so I understand how kids can come in. I saw kids come in like gangsters, 15-year-old boy, 6 foot tall. He's been his dad's right-hand man in this drug ring. And he's carried around weapons, and he's had prostitutes, and he's the big man of the house. And he comes into this juvenile facility, and no, you don't get any privileges until you conform. No, you're not allowed to listen to that music. All of your T-shirts with the marijuana stuff on it are taken away from you. No, you don't get to play outside with others until you conform. And now within 3 months, this kid is the sweetest kid you'd ever want to be. And he finally gets to be a kid and not a gangster. So I think what happens is you have the force of authority, and it's not abuse. It's authority. It's a firm authority saying, this is the way it's going to be for you. And these are your options. If you choose this way, you're going to have a good thing. If you choose this way, it's going to be a bad thing. And those kids changed because of that.
It's a remarkable experience, and it's hard to eloquently discuss this concept of that force of authority. That the authority, the power, the force, all of those things within a treatment paradigm, within a healing place, can be bigger, it can be stronger, it can be more intense. We used martial arts in our residential program. And inevitably, once a quarter, there would be a boy who would come in, and I would step on the mat to teach, and the kids would all kind of have a half-hidden grin on their face. And I know what's coming. This boy has told the others he thinks he can take me. And at some point, as he's edging closer to try to get in, I'll just turn to him and say, go ahead, you can try. And never once was his response to actually swing. His response was to say, what would you do? And everybody would laugh and ooh and everything. And of course it would go into conversation, but it was so Neanderthal to experience that the moment that the boys knew that at least one man in the facility could take them, they relaxed. They didn't get intense. They didn't try to, they surrendered to, okay, he can keep me safe. Yeah, it's safety.
They feel safer. Now, I think that some parents confuse authority with power and control. And anger, and they think, okay, if I scream and yell, if I whack my kid back, it's going to work. But, when I worked with juvenile delinquents, they had a joke, that, you use a gun, you're going to have to do community service. That to them, it was a big joke. So when the force of law enforcement came down on them, it was like, no, you're still held accountable. I had a kid show up with drugs hanging out of the pocket of his shirt, just daring me, like, okay, you're busted, kid. You're going to, I'm following the rules here, and the rules protect you and keep you safe. And he was reassured by that. It was like, oh, I can count on authority to be consistent and do what they're supposed to do. And so many of these kids have been raised in environments where, and I'm not saying that's true of all kids that get involved in trouble, but a lot of the children that I see doing the most extreme behaviors, they don't have a sense of trust in authority. And they've been mistreated, or they have been abused, or they feel unsafe because their parents are weak. And here's how parents become weak. They get divorced, and they undermine the authority of the other parent. And so the kids can split the parental authority. Mom lets me do this. Dad doesn't let me do that. Dad's the bad guy. Oh, mom's the bad guy when I'm at dad's, and so the parents don't work together as a team saying, hey, our child is troubled. They've been sneaking out at night. We need to be a united team. We can hate each other, but we can be a united team. And we have to be the firm voice of authority saying, no, you're not going to play us against each other. So when parents are weakened, there's nothing I see more that triggers anger in teens than a weak authority. And you're weakened by being corrupt. You're weakened by lying. You're weakened by, divorce not working and collaboration. You're weakened. I've even had people, in family therapy with me, where the parents were trying to split me, pull me into their battle. The kid sees this and they're like, who the hell do I listen to? What the heck do I do? And they feel so unsafe and so insecure, and they get furious. So when I did, years later, I developed this anger management program for teens, and pretty much 99% of the angry teens I worked with had weak parents. I had one girl who she said to me, she was 16 years old in gangs. She had a whole case of guns in a trunk full of guns, locked under her bed. And her mother said, I just don't know what to do with this. And I just don't know how to, and I just can't cope. And I just, and I'm like, there's a program with the police department where you can turn in guns. You put them in your car. What if they go off? So she was so paralyzed with fear of her daughter being mad at her that she allowed this whole case of guns to be in her house, So I do think some parents need to get some backbone and say, somebody has to be in charge here. If they're not in charge, the kids will be in charge, and they aren't qualified to be in charge.
So like many of you, I survived parenting and running a treatment center on 2 to 3 cups of coffee every single morning. And I know you've probably seen this product, especially if you shop at Sprouts. Magic Mind? I've been drinking Magic Mind, and now I drink less coffee than I have. I like the focus. I like the amount of energy, and I don't have the crash I usually have that makes me run for another cup of coffee. You got to check out Magic Mind. The things that it has in it that keep you healthy are worth it on its own. The replacement of coffee, it's incredible. Let's start there, because I think, first of all, we're talking about something that parents listening who might find themselves in this situation, this is hard to hear. You got to have a backbone. You got to be able to stand in this darkness with your child. They're being loud. Maybe they've threatened you. This boy who was the love of your life and the apple of your eye is now towering over you, threatening you that if you touch his computer or his phone, he'll beat you up, he'll hurt you. And it's frightening, especially if you're dealing with trauma yourself, especially if it's like, oh, this is what my dad used to do. This is how my mom, and you're triggered out. So let's start from the lowest common denominator and say, this is how you get a backbone. When you're in the middle of the worst things your kid can say to you. God, I remember listening to a parent say that the son said to her, when you go to sleep tonight, I'm going to kill you and all your precious children, talking about her biological children. She's a stepmom. And so obviously she didn't sleep that night. And my first response is, why didn't you call the cops? Well, and it's immediately this, well, the same type of thing. If you take my cell phone, I'll kill myself. This was something a girl had said to one of the moms. And I said, so they threatened suicide. Well, they were just trying to get attention. I was like, yep. Did you give it to them? Well, it's a cry for help. Yep. Did you help? What does helping look like? To me, it's 911. You get it rolling. This is out of your wheelhouse.
Or it's let's look at the hospital, because if you are that unstable. But I think in that moment, I mean, you're right. Parents can be triggered. It's like, what happened to my child? But I think sometimes people want to die on the hill of, I'm going to win this, or I got to let my kid win this. It's really about the relationship. We can't persuade anyone unless we have some foundational trust in the relationship. So once a child has gotten to this point that they feel so desperate, their lifeline is their computer and their cell phone. Their self-esteem, their self-worth, everything is around their connections with people, and that's all through the phone and the computer. And they feel this desperation that they've gotten so desperate that they've threatened their parents. Then I would start right there with not reacting, but do deep breathing and just be very calm and just say something very calming. Like, it must be so scary for you to think about losing your computer right now that you would even threaten your mother or your father. You must feel so hurt and so scared right now to do this. This isn't like you. Why don't we just calm down right now? Because if the parent tries to come back with equal force, you're not addressing the underlying emotional needs. So the child is feeling a tremendous amount of fear. Now, that fear could be because they need to get their drugs, right? That fear could be because there's a relationship at stake, and they need to be, there's some things going on with their friendship group, and if they're not in that, they feel like they're going to be socially dead. And that's their life.
Sure, it's a safety, power, connection, freedom, worth, crutch, lifeline that you have suddenly threatened to take away.
The reason you might be threatening to take it away is it's a discipline thing. And that's the one thing you feel like they're, going to really notice, and it's leverage. But I think rather than urgently needing to win that battle, it might be helpful to think about how scared and angry and desperate your child must be to be that way. Because underlying anger, that kind of rage, is fear. When that rage is coming at you, that's connection. That's not disconnection. So when your children are coming at you with rage, they're desperately saying, I'm hurting, I'm scared, I'm desperate. One of the things that cuts right through it, and I've seen this happen over and over in counseling sessions, I've seen this over and over when I've taught parents how to just be strong and calm and do some deep breathing. Your heart could be going ka-dunk, 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 but to do some deep breathing and just say, you must be so hurt right now and so scared and so desperate that you feel this way. And a lot of times it can be, your feelings matter to me and I care so much about you. I'm so sorry you're hurting. Then a lot of times I will see kids that go from rage to just collapsing on the floor in tears because they finally feel listened to. And that is one of the number one things that angry kids say too, is that they don't listen. They preach, they don't listen. They don't know me. They don't have any idea what I'm going through. They don't, they think that my life is easy. And that was a study that came out in the Monitor on Psychology a while back, where they said that parents grossly underestimate the amount of stress that their children are experiencing. And we assume that, because they don't have to work every day to put food on the table, that their life isn't hard. But they are struggling with identity, with relationships, with self-esteem, with trying to learn things that are difficult, with worrying about the world. I see so many kids today, they're worried about, is there going to be a safe world for me to live in with climate change? They're worried about climate change. They're worried about, am I going to even have a job? Is Social Security even going to be there for me when I get old? Am I even going to live to be 30? Kids are actually worried about big, big things. And so I think when parents underestimate that and don't listen, then we miss a point of connection where we could persuade them. We can only persuade if there's some connection of understanding.
It feels like, and you've said it twice on the show so far, and I can't tell you how many experts talk about it, taking a deep breath. And the issue so much when you talk about, a kid starts to rage out and everything, in all the practice that I've had and all the practice that you've had, we can see very clearly that a calm, strong back, open heart, where you look at a kid who's screaming and yelling and crying and calling you names that you need to go look up on the Urban Dictionary once this is all over with, that I've always been able to say, are you okay? You're right, the collapse, because you're connected. That rage is a connection point. Violence is the disconnect. Rage is not a disconnect. Conflict is not a disconnect. Violence is a disconnect. Violence is a dehumanization of something. But angry and yelling at me, we're still right here, but we escalate. As adults, we escalate. As parents, they yell. We can yell louder, so we yell louder, forgetting that teens have no volume limit. They don't go to 11. They go to infinity, and if you want to see how crazy somebody can get, watch a teen get crazy. They will say and do anything. And we think, and this is the part that really gets me, is that if I'm arguing with an out of control teenager, I have to really wonder of the sanity of myself, not the out of control teenager. If I'm an adult yelling at a child, let me say that slowly, an adult yelling at a child, that to me is where the logic starts to show up, but it doesn't. We say stupid things, we say angry things, we say hurtful things, and we yell back and we amplify the situation. Why? Is it really just survival mode? I love what you said. We have to win this. Why? Is that?
We don't have to win the battle. It's really more important to think about the emotional need that made this child escalate, and what is that need, and how can we address that need. And I think you're right. We can be triggered, right? Maybe many parents have been abused as children and they're triggered, or as parents, we feel like we failed. So it affects our self-esteem. So then we feel like we have to desperately put them in their place, or, and instead, if we can be the emotional strength, if we can muster that, even if we're just acting, even if inside we want to collapse on the floor and cry, if we can just, like you said, take that deep breath and go, I'm here for you. You matter to me. So sorry you feel this desperate right now that you would threaten me. You must be hurting. If we can do that, even if another voice in our head wants to do something else, we are being more emotionally mature than our child. And I always tell parents, we need to be more emotionally mature than our child. And I know a lot of parents will just scream and yell at a 2-year-old, like, just shut up, And I'm like, you know what? You're doing the same thing. You're just saying bigger words. Your 2-year-old might be having a tantrum, but you need to at least be 4 or 5 years old right now, because if they need to borrow our strength to calm down, they need to borrow from our serenity, not the other way around. We don't need our serenity to depend on our children. And so if we can demand that of ourselves as authority figures, and I've worked with oppositional defiant kids that they will look for every way to push your button. And I had a kid in one of my anger management groups, he's like, what's the worst thing a kid ever did to you? It's like, I want to up him, I want to do worse than the worst kid you ever had. And so I knew right away, and so I just made him the leader of the group, and I made him, I gave him all kinds of things to do, and I made him in charge, and, it was fine. But I was the most emotionally mature person in the room because I was not going to react to, his game. He throws the tug of war rope out. I'm not picking it up. I'm the one in charge of the game we're playing, So I think that a lot of parents will feel helpless, and nothing makes us feel more angry than feeling.
So I wanna get, how parents can follow up with you and resources, materials, websites that you have for parents. So the parents can follow up with you, especially because you have information about, angry parents and angry teenagers. But I have to ask, why do we, when we're arguing with our spouses, with our kids, why do we feel like we have to win?
Well, I think it's primitive, right? We have this desperate need to feel understood, and we often will raise our voices louder to try to get the other person to see it from our perspective. And that's not effective. Oftentimes we have arguments, and I talk to couples. I do a lot of work with couples as well. And I say, every couple is going to have the same fight. You just get better at it. You're going to have the same fight through your whole marriage. And every couple has one. It's going to be you're messy, I'm neat. It's going to be you want to spend more time with your parents and I don't. It's the same fight. But if you learn from experience, you can learn that the quickest way to get through a fight is to go, your partner flares up and is angry at you and says something insensitive. You want to flare up and go, how dare you say that to me, or whatever you say back. If you can stop yourself in the moment and going, my partner's hurt. My partner has a need. I love my partner. Let me ask for what that underlying emotional need is. Let me speak to that underlying emotional need. For my husband and I, we both, we are go, go, go people. And so end of the day, we can get angry, hungry, tired, and cranky. And so we both have this real tolerance for just being cranky with each other because we know after decades of marriage that it's not personal. It's not personal. It's just we're tired and hungry, So we give each other that grace, right? So I go, okay, I know my husband's tired, and as soon as we have dinner, we'll sit here, we'll relax together, and we're fine, and it's not personal, and there's nothing at stake here, right? But oftentimes you have to get through the first 10 years of marriage to get to that place where you go, it isn't personal. It is really just a temporary emotional need we have that we're not expressing in an appropriate way or a very kind way. I think that every couple has these triggers if you have any passion at all in the relationship. There are some couples that never fight and they have no passion. Any passionate relationship, you're going to have flare-ups of anger. And that's connection. That's emotional connection. That's energy coming toward you. It's not energy that's cutting you off, So when your children are angry with you, that's also like, hear me, they're saying desperately. Please listen to me. Please notice me and help me with this thing I'm struggling with that I don't know how to articulate. I don't know how to get through. And so if we can just be there with them in that place, often they will share a lot. And I've had kids share things with me that they've never told their parents and never told anyone else either because, girls who've been raped and they couldn't tell their parents and because they had snuck out at night and went to a party they weren't supposed to be at, and they were afraid of getting in trouble, or they're afraid their brother's going to beat up this gang kid or get killed, or you know, and so they're holding these secrets. They were molested by their priest, you know. They're holding these secrets courageously. I had a girl who was so angry. It took her a year of therapy before she told me that she was raped in a movie theater. She went, her parents dropped her off with this boy at a movie theater. She was raped in the stairwell, 15 years old. Couldn't tell her parents because they were in a weakened state. They were under a lot of stress. The mom had an illness, a serious illness, lots going on in the family. She held that secret for over a year. But she was angry. And so the parents treated it like, you know, disrespect, anger, rebellious. What happened to my kid? Why is she acting out? Why is she not doing well in school? It took a year of therapy before she could even tell her therapist, which was confidential, you know. So eventually I worked with her and the family, and everyone cried and everyone held each other, and they got their kid back. So kids are going through stuff. They're going through stuff, really hard things. And I think as parents, we need to open our mind to the fact that we don't know everything affecting them, and we need to listen more.
How are parents going to follow up with you?
My website is frazzlebrain.com. I have a book, Frazzle Brain, Break Free from Anxiety, Anger, and Stress Using Advanced Discoveries in Neuropsychology. And it's a very helpful tool for anyone who wants to lower their nervous system arousal and learn more effective ways of coping with these big, bad, scary emotions. It has a lot of tools in there for anyone, parenting an angry teen, even though it's not a parenting book. But frazzlebrain.com has all my social media links, and you can follow me. I love questions. So if anyone has follow-up questions, please feel free to contact me through the contact form there and ask your questions. I get back to everyone. And I love being helpful if I can, and pointing anyone to resources that might be helpful.
Make sure you go to frazzlebrain.com. I'm looking at the page. Her book's right there on the front cover, or the front page of her website. Check out Dr. Schneider's book. In martial arts, a long time ago, I was told a story about a master asking his students, why do people yell? And the student says, oh, they're angry at each other. And he says, no. He says it's because they don't feel like they're being listened to. And he goes, no. The student says, I don't know, master. Why do people yell? And he says, because their hearts are far apart. He says, look to a new couple who's just getting to know each other. They don't know everything about each other. They don't understand each other's hearts completely. And so they yell. They yell from across the room, and they yell in each other's faces, all the while trying to put their hearts as close together. And look to a couple that's been married for a while. They yell every now and then, but they know more about each other. And so they yell less. And when they do yell, they feel very, very far away. Now look to the old couple who sits quietly on the porch, not saying a word, because they know each other's hearts. They don't even need to speak anymore. And I love that, because what I really hear Dr. Schneider saying is, there's force, yelling and screaming and threats and even violence. There's force, but there's always a bigger force. Right. And as parents, we try to find the bigger force or be the bigger force, or we call a bigger force the police force. And there's always a bigger force. But I always saw love as power. And in martial arts, we're taught that a force in motion stays in motion until, met with an opposing force of equal or greater energy. But power, that's something different. And in 15 years of doing martial arts with teenagers, angry teenagers, big teenagers, I never had an issue because I used power. I didn't use force. And the power was they knew I loved them. They knew I cared about them. They knew I could keep them safe and that I would. I just gotten back in touch with one boy I remember working with, and he had a big penchant for violence, and he came out of a room and his fists were balled up and his chin was jutted out and his back were hunched over. And I immediately went up to him and I said, where are you going? He said, get out of my way, Huey. And so I mimicked his posture. hunched my back and I balled my fist. I said, I'm not going anywhere, Caleb. She said, get out of me. I'm going to take a swing at you. I know you could kick my ass. I'm not leaving. I don't want to leave you. I want to be here with you. And I opened my hands. And then I flipped my hands over like a waiter would hold a tray. And I kept talking to him and I just kept soothing my voice. And I straightened my back and I pulled my chin back and I just kept talking to him. And because I mimicked his body language, he started to mimic mine. He started mirroring mine, his hands unballed. He started talking quietly. And we just stood there in the hall. The entire facility was watching us. And I finally just said at almost a whisper, Caleb, are you okay? And just like Dr. Schneider said, tears fall to the floor. Connection. She's right. It's the strongest nervous system that wins. Somebody's got to be the adult when an adult and a teenager are screaming. So parents, remember, to get this strong nervous system, to be in that space, you have to take care of yourselves first. Your adult relationship second. Get that support. Make the connection with your current or your exes. Get the adult relationship healthy again. So that third, you can take care of your kids. Big shout out to Deepen Productions for making the show sound good. And huge thanks to my guests, Dr. Gina Simmons Schneider. Check out our website, frazzlebrain.com. I'll see you next week on Beyond Risk and Back. Big shout out to Magic Mind, who's the sponsor of today's show. Amazing stuff. I'm enjoying it a lot.